So, perhaps unsurprisingly, our new strategy has 5 chapters, the first 3 of which are those 3 clauses in our mission statement. So the first around advancing knowledge, we are protecting and indeed will grow applicant-led research, so what you used to know as responsive mode research, as much as the economy allows. So it's 737 million this year. It will be rising to 815 million the year after, and 866 million by the end of the spending review. We will also be increasing our core QR funding at flat reel. Jessica may talk about that later. The other benefit of being clear about the 3 different parts of our mission is that when we're assessing for curiosity-driven research, we can be really clear about what we want from that. So we can assess against novelty and we can assess against excellence and sort of hold those things in highest regard and not really worry about impact and social value return, because there are other parts of our portfolio where that is why we're making an investment. So we can be clear for the different parts of our portfolio what it is we want and then assess against those criteria. And in advancing knowledge, it is really about the novelty and the transformative step that this makes in any given field. The second chapter is around improving lives. The biggest change that you'll see here is an aggregation of previously federated budgets, which would have sat in the different research councils, now in one place. So I give the example of AI. At the moment, we have, I think I counted it up to be 13 different sources of money for our AI program. So each of the 7 disciplinary councils, plus Innovate UK, plus at least 2 sources coming out of Research England, so the quality-related research funding and higher education innovation funding, and then also money that goes through infrastructure, money that goes through international, money for skills. So it adds up to 13 different pots of money. And so that risks fragmentation, it risks incoherence, and perhaps worse, it risks duplication. So we're putting all of that into one place so that we have one pot of money to do each of the industrial strategy subsectors. And we have one responsible owner for that. So we can be much more, I hope, much more coherent as an organisation, and allow partners a greater clarity about what our focus will be in the future. The third chapter will be around driving growth and how we help companies to start, how we help companies to scale, and ultimately how we help companies to stay and make an impact on the UK economy. You may have picked up, we launched a prospectus for Innovate UK last week. You can certainly find that online, which is around the sort of curation of innovation. It's the phrase that I use for this, how we help companies on their growth and scaling journey, not that we give them a grant and sort of walk off and then they come back and ask for another grant and we assess it again, but that we're really with them on the journey and we're seeing their progress and walking alongside and helping knock down any roadblocks in their way. And as long as they're meeting their milestones and delivering on the intended outputs, then we are in a partnership with them. So we'll do greater tech due diligence up front. We'll do more investigation of the quality of the team and the founders. But then once we invest, we're investing as part of a journey with that company. That will mean that we focus on fewer companies, but we give them more concerted attention and really help them on that journey. This is a curation service that we're calling Velocity, and our aim, my bad physics joke, I'm afraid, my aim is that we help them reach escape velocity, where they don't need us anymore, and that they can succeed. But you must make sure you don't launch too soon or launch with too much weight. Make sure that the terms are right for them to reach that escape velocity. Then the fourth chapter will be around the underpinning enablers and foundations to the whole system. So how we help investment in regions, investment in infrastructure, investment with international partners, and particularly, and perhaps most importantly, because it is one of the most important things that UKRI does, is investment in talent and skills and the next generation pipeline of high quality people that underpin all of our efforts. And finally, there is a fifth chapter around how we become a high quality and highly efficient organisation. Let me give you 2 stats on this because they really stick in my head. The first is that as an organisation, we spend more than £1 million an hour. we cannot afford to take hours, days, weeks, months making decisions, because that's the rate at which we spend. And I want to reduce the entropy and be as clear as possible about accountabilities and delegations so that we can be slick as an organisation. And slick, I use determinedly as a combination of simple and quick. And I don't think many people feel those things about UKRI at the moment. So that it won't happen overnight, but that is what we're aspiring to become as an organisation. And the second thing is to make sure that we collectively, the whole system, are using our resources as efficiently as possible. As an example of that, last year we processed more than 32,000 grant applications. 32,000 grant applications is a lot, right? And conservatively, if you imagine when you combine the PI time, the co-I time, the university review of that, then the peer reviewers, the panel, and the UKRI staff administering the whole process, for each one of them, maybe a third of a person year. So that means it's 10,000 person years in applying for grants in our system. That's a lot. You could do a lot with 10,000 brilliant people. So making sure that we utilise our resources as effectively and efficiently as possible is absolutely a key part of our future strategy. So those are the 5 chapters. We are, of course, very interested in feedback in the approach that we're taking. We have been doing a number of consultation events around the country. I think we've done 7 or 8 roundtables around the country now, and we're doing this big webinar with you too, and to get your feedback, understand your questions, understand your concerns, and your input into the process as we work this out. Our aim is to do this over the next few months and publish a strategy before the summer, so towards late June or early July, something like that. So that's probably enough jibber jabber from me. Let's start taking some questions. Claire, over to you, somewhere in the background that you can start asking questions.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks so much to everyone who sent questions in. As Ian mentioned, we've had over 400 that came in before this session, so we won't be able to get through all of them today, but we'll cover as many of the hot topics as we can. As we go along, feel free to upvote on any of the questions in the Q&A as well, as that will really help us to focus on the hottest topics for this session. Okay, so the first question we've got is, the new strategy introduces a clear distinction between curiosity-driven and strategic research. How will UKRI ensure that this balance is maintained over the 5-year strategy, and what mechanisms are in place to prevent strategic priorities from inadvertently crowding out curiosity-driven, investigator-led proposals?
I mean, put simply, I can answer that. We published in December our budget explainer, which shows how the budgets for each of the 3 legs evolve over time. And you'll see in that budget explainer the numbers associated for applicant-led research, for quality-related research going out over the 4 years. And you can see that the curiosity-driven part, the unrestricted and applicant-led part of our funding, is indeed protected over that period. Indeed, it grows over that period. So right at the top level of our budget allocations, that is now known for the next 4 years. I mean, I should be clear that this is part of a sort of a deal with the government that growth is the top priority for them, and they do invest in research and innovation in order to drive economic growth. But they recognise that there are different temporal bases for that. And if you're not investing in curiosity-driven discovery research, then you don't have the foundations to grow the economy in the future. We are now growing the economy based on investments that we made 20, 30 years ago. I regularly point out that there would be no quantum sector in the industrial strategy or engineering biology sector in the industrial strategy if we hadn't started investing in quantum technology and synthetic biology 25 years ago. So, it's our responsibility to look after the future as well as the now. And that is why I hope being clear about the 3 legs of our mission statement are all equally important. And we all fundamentally believe that we must protect curiosity-driven research. I mean, maybe I could throw to Jessica to talk about QR, and Stian could give us an example from ESRC.
Yeah, delighted to. I mean, it's great to be part of this conversation this afternoon, Ian. QR, quality related research funding, is absolutely protected. It's giving stable funding to universities over the next 4 years. That was our objective as we came through the spending review. So it's really good that we are going to be doing that. And in fact, that does grow a little bit, with tracking a real terms increase over that time. So that funding, which goes into around 127 or so universities in England, their equivalents in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, but not those funds don't run through UKRI, are given to universities to determine how that should be strategically invested in support of particularly curiosity-driven research, although it also does other things. It underpins salaries, it supports PhD students, early career researchers. It covers the gaps between grants. It does all sorts of things, and it's firmly there. So that's a great picture.
Thanks. And to build on that from the point of view of our applicant-led modes, I guess I would start by saying I think it's incredibly valuable that we are able to invest in applicant-led mode research precisely because we now have this partnership with a government that is really loudly making the case that curiosity-driven research is the wellspring of future discoveries. I think it's really important that whenever Patrick Vallance, whenever ministers go up and talk about science, they make that point, which hasn't always been the case. I think that's a real thing that we can build on. And that's given us the backing, the confidence to make the investments that Ian and Jessica have been talking about. Certainly when I think about how that plays out in social science investment that I'm responsible for, we are increasing the amount year by year that we are committing to social science applicant-led mode research. It also means we're able to refresh our portfolio to make sure that the way we're funding that applicant-led mode research is really geared to towards supporting researchers who are working at the knowledge frontier in social sciences. So we put in place our new Connect program that provides seed funding to scope out good ideas, and we are making sure we're listening to community feedback about how to run our existing programs as well as possible. So I'm really encouraged by what we've been able to do with the government support on this particular area.
Okay, thanks. Next question.
We have seen several recent UKRI calls with extremely tight turnarounds. Is UKRI aware of the intense pressure this places on applicants and institutions? And is this trend likely to continue, or is it temporary result linked to spending review timescales?
No, it's not. It's not likely to continue. My commitment to the community is that we should be able to give you a really good pipeline of what's coming into the future. My initial aspiration was that we'd be able to tell you 6 months out. Actually, if you look at the communications that the MRC put out recently, they've indicated all of their calls, open and close dates all the way through to December. So that is the type of behaviour that we should be showing across the board, showing you our start and close dates well in advance so that you can prepare accordingly. We will also be running quarterly webinars a bit like this to be able to give you sight of what's coming over the course of the next quarter so that you know what's coming and you can prepare accordingly. There is a little bit of a blip right at the moment where we're just about to enter a new spending review period. We only got our budget at Christmas. We do have to start launching processes so that you all have ability to secure funding during the financial year, and we just didn't have an ability to have that run up, I'm afraid. So I apologise that there is a little bit of a rush on some calls at the moment. Please have some forbearance with us, but our intent is that you get good pipeline visibility. I think we are now doing that on the Medical Research Council, but we should be doing it across the board. So we're working towards that. And Stian, if you want to comment from your perspective.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, what we're trying to do, first of all, as well as Ian said, making sure that we are publishing our opportunities in the future. Where possible, we're trying to minimise these hard deadlines that drive this kind of behaviour. So, for example, with our centres, we are moving from a very rigid ordering of when we will run the centres process to an always open process, again, because one of the things we've learned from our work on funding processes is those deadlines, as anyone will know who's applied, drive stress on the part of applicants. So we're doing everything we can in the context of this to make the process more manageable from your point of view and to avoid these artificial rushes.
Thank you. Jessica, this might be one for you around place-based funding. So in 2023-24, UKRI invested £214 per person in London compared to £104 per person in Yorkshire and Humber. How will UKRI's new strategy address long-standing regional funding disparities? How will place-based funding reach regions that don't have an obvious focus on any of the IS8 sectors?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, over the last couple of years, and we're trying to do even more of it now, we've been looking at how UKRI can develop a place awareness investment strategy. We brought in a policy for a UKRI, which means that place is a consideration of funding decisions. It's not the funding decision, but it's part of the mix of how we make decisions around where investment goes, to be conscious of the fact that we want funding to spread across the whole of the UK, rather than be very concentrated in the past in the Greater South East. We publish annually the figures around how our spend is distributed regionally. And we have shown that has gradually been changing to that greater distribution beyond the traditional Greater South East sort of concentration, which has been very good news, and we hope to continue that. As you know, we've got funded programmes that are absolutely directed at place. The current one is the Local Innovation Partnerships Fund, which is the 500 million fund with two strands. One strand where there's an investment to earmarked places, that's combined mayor authorities, 7 of them in England, and then city regions in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, being given a dedicated fund to identify high potential clusters of innovative companies in those areas, and to take projects to help accelerate the research and development opportunities for those clusters, and have really innovative programs and projects that invest to support that development of the cluster. There's a second strand which is also about opening up that competition to all other places across the UK in a competition, and we are imminently about to begin announcing the places that will be funded through that mechanism. So that's an exciting moment that will emerge over the next week or two. It's a new way of working for UKRI, where we have built teams to work directly with places across the UK, with staff interacting with staff from combined mayor authorities, businesses and universities on the ground in places, where we together create the best opportunities for funding. And I think in future this will be a fantastic platform for further UKRI investment to be kind of crowded in around some of those investments. So it's a concerted approach to try and develop areas of opportunity for the country that are very relevant to a local place. And some of those, yes, absolutely directed at the industrial strategy sectors, but not all of them. It's where great work can be done. And yeah, it's exciting time and programmes to come.
Can I build on that with an invitation to people on the call? So I was in Belfast all of Monday. Hello to anyone from Northern Ireland who's on the call. I've just come from a meeting with colleagues in West Yorkshire talking about the innovation system. And one thing that Jessica and Ian and I really am convinced about is that the basis for investment in places is relationship, it's discussion, it's planning together with you about what matters. So we are trying to make efforts to get out there, to talk to you, to make sure that we are co-developing some of these things, whether that's in the context of the Local Innovation Partnerships Fund or other schemes. So please reach out to us, help us work with you on how to bring together researchers, business, government in your area, because we know that to develop these clusters where we can make the investments that can help make the difference, that needs to be born out of dialogue and long-term partnership.
Yeah, Christina, and just to add to that, you're wonderfully representing the fact that we have an executive chair from one of the research councils who's got a contact with different regions across the country, and it just illustrates the fact that we're trying to build that really prominent relationship both at your level, me for the West Midlands, but also at different other levels where projects can be directly developed and supported.
Thank you both. Recent press releases suggest a shift towards a consortium-based model for applicant-led research. How will you ensure that early and mid-career researchers remain competitive under new funding models that favour larger consortia and senior-led grants?
Yeah, I mean, I would be. I don't think there's any sort of one size fits all there. We'll run many different schemes, and we're not saying that all applicant-led research should be consortia. We're open to the best proposals. So sometimes that is a small team, sometimes it's an individual, sometimes it's a big team. All of those things are fine, and they should be able to find a home in our system. So I don't think we have any particular prejudice there.
And I mean, to build on that, something that's actually come through the meta-science research that UKRI has been doing recently is about the value that there is a value of team science, but there's also really important value of smaller teams doing really focused research. So we definitely don't want a world where we are only pushing applicants towards very large bids, which can sometimes diffuse energy. So absolutely, there's no one size fits all model there.
Thank you. Given the focus around economic growth and the IS8 sectors, how is UKRI planning to address interdisciplinary collaboration between STEM and non-STEM disciplines for funding calls? Could collaboration with social sciences, arts and humanities be at risk?
Ian, do you want to have a go?
One for me, yeah. So I mean, I am deeply convinced, and my colleagues on the UKRI Executive Committee are deeply convinced that social sciences and arts humanities have a vital role to play, not both intrinsically and in delivering these core government priorities and the successful deployment of things like the industrial strategy. To make that a reality, I mean, I and Christopher Smith at the Arts and Humanities Research Council and our colleagues throughout the organisation are deeply involved in the scoping and the design of our investments in the IS8 areas, whether that's through sitting on the programme boards that we're establishing or from the deep and close work that happens at our staff level across the research councils. And we're really drawing on the fact that staff have been working collaboratively together for a long time, building on the fact that we know there's amazing interdisciplinary research going on out there, whether that's on the social sciences of how technologies get adopted or deployed, the arts and humanities elements of those things, the specific role of the arts and humanities in the creative industries that Christopher Smith is responsible for. We know there's a whole range of those things, and it's something that my colleagues as well as me are very sensitive to. The other things that I'm making sure that I do as part of that are talking to social science leaders and talking to social science researchers, particularly in some of those areas that relate to the industrial strategy, to make sure that on the one hand they're aware of opportunities, but also that they are aware of what's going on so they can help pitch in and shape those opportunities, because there will be many ideas out there that I don't know about and that my colleagues don't know about, but that we need to encourage that dialogue. So the Academy of Social Sciences, the British Academy, have been very helpful in this process, but I would encourage anyone who cares passionately about social sciences or the arts and humanities to seize the opportunity and to work with us to step up this investment.
I just build on that and say that, I mean, I think fundamentally the humanities and social sciences are they're horizontals in each of the industrial strategy sectors. I mean, we're making those investments to improve people's lives, and you just cannot improve people's lives without thinking about the human element of that and thinking about the deployment, the social acceptability, all of the sort of social sciences and the humanities which actually lead to deployment. So I think they have to be embedded in all of those programs. You know, one of the things that I'm most passionate about is that you will see the biggest gains, and in my view, you will have the biggest differentiation internationally. And to be honest, it's one of the reasons that UKRI even exists, is to make the most of convergent research, where we bring together multidisciplinary teams. That's why the in buckets 2 and 3, the parts where we're doing research that impacts and improves lives and helping companies to start and scale, they are almost proudly not tied to any of the councils. They are deliberately meant to be a rainbow team federated of of all the disciplines and all the expertise to be able to do everything in a multidisciplinary way. It's not a sort of add-on at the side in a small competition where we're just doing a tiny bit of multidisciplinary research. It's sort of the majority of our budget should be for multidisciplinary research.
Thanks, Ian. When you spoke of the curiosity research, you mentioned that applications will be judged against excellence and novelty criteria as opposed to societal impact criteria. Does that mean that non-academic impact criterion is going to be removed from the evaluation of the curiosity mode grant schemes?
So I should be really clear about this. At the moment, no change. We are having a conversation within the leadership team at UKRI about how we go about improving our assessment processes. My own personal bent, and I'm not, this is not a corporate position yet, but my own personal bent is that I would like to see us use a spectrum when we're making assessment decisions, which go from right down at the discovery end. You're rating really high on novelty and excellence of research, and up this end, actually, you might even be issuing a contract rather than a grant, and you might say, well, at this end, I'm going to value very highly the social impact. I'm going to value very highly the delivery track record of the team, and maybe less so on novelty, because I want to make sure I get output in the next 2 years. So you should be using the right assessment technique it's horses for courses for the right part of our portfolio, rather than trying to use the same assessment tools for everything and the same weightings for everything. So that's my own sort of, like I say, we haven't yet made any changes to our assessment techniques, but it's my own personal view is that by having clarity that our mission statement has these 3 components, we can be clearer about what we're looking for from each of the interventions that we make. Stian, you think deeply about this. You might wish to comment as well.
I mean, I'm going to echo quite a bit of what you said, which is that I think there is. I'm as a social scientist, I believe in the benefits to division of labour, and I think that sometimes there is a real benefit to people who are extremely specialised in the impact end, and sometimes there's a benefit of great specialisation in the kind of pushing the knowledge frontier end, and that we need, and this is how certainly we're looking at the ESRC applicant-led mode, we need to respect both of those and have opportunities for both types of research. Now, there are some absolutely wonderful projects that are both highly impactful and push the knowledge frontier.
Right.
But I think that sometimes there's trade-off, and we need to not try and encourage every project to be a Swiss Army knife that tries to do everything.
Thank you. How will UKRI support innovative startups that don't come out of the research system, as they're a significant part of the pipeline for scaling businesses?
In the same way that we do startups that do come out of the university system or out of centres and institutes, when we make investments into starting companies, they can come from anywhere. I have no prejudice as to whether it's a startup that's been founded by people who've just got an idea. They might have come out of a big multinational. There is no prejudice against the genesis of that company and idea. We should be looking for the highest potential companies which have the highest growth potential and are most internationally differentiated. I think it would be wrong of us, in fact, to have a prejudice about the genesis of where they've come from. So we think it is part of our job. It's why we exist, is to go out and find the best ideas wherever they come from.
Yeah, I might add to that, Ian, in the sort of university base, the Department of Education actually provides money into the Higher Education Innovation Fund to make sure that we support student startups as part of that university, support for startup companies. It's not just those that happen to emerge out there in the business world. Actually, we're also supporting students to be enterprising and start their own companies, which is a learning exercise, and some of them will go on to be permanent and great companies. So it's happening at all levels.
Thank you. A follow-up question from something you mentioned earlier around growth. So growth requires adoption and implementation of technologies into industry. How can UKRI enhance the speed of adoption of technology and reduce the potential for duplication of effort?
Yeah. So on accelerating adoption, I think there's a big incumbence on us to have tighter strategic relationships with the big primes that exist in the country, and also to use public procurement as a lever here. Connections and contracts often win out over cash when you're talking about how does a company grow, and growing companies need contracts. They need revenue. And so one of the biggest levers that the public purse has in this is that the government spends hundreds of billions every year buying things from companies, and how we connect that massive lever of public procurement to the innovative companies that we're helping to develop is again, it's part of our job. We need to help facilitate that connection. Equally, I would like us to have a relationship with our big industrial primes in the country, where they can say to us, if you do this piece of research, if you invest in this, it will make tangible difference to our bottom line, to our yield, to our market share, and expect us therefore to treat that as a priority for the country, because they do make substantive difference to GDP and they employ hundreds of thousands of people. And the quid pro quo is that they should be pulling through the technology which is born in startups, and actually procuring from them and actually acquiring some of those companies and being the exit route. So there's a reciprocity there with our big industrial partners. So a combination of public procurement and working with our big strategic partners in industry is the best way that we can help pull through and adopt technology, in my view.
If I can build on that, the procurement is clearly one of these great underpowered tools that we have in drawing through technologies into wide use. The other thing where UKRI has something to offer is the question around regulation of some of these technologies, and we're working closely with people like the Regulatory Innovation Office at DCIT, and for example through the work that we did on the Fingleton Review of Nuclear Energy, to say, are there regulatory barriers that we have a unique understanding of through the research partners we work with, that by changing those we can help deploy innovation? Classic example in our AI work, where there are a lot of regulations that in various ways mention a responsible person needs to approve a step of the process, and those would have been written in 1986 when no one would ever have thought that anything other than a person would have done something. And that going through these and really doing that kind of careful, diligent work, a lot of which I should say take place in the social sciences and the arts and humanities, can really help deploy that. So we recognize that as well as the funding, that procurement element and the innovation element can really help with that question of deployment of technology.
Thanks, Stian. Ian, we've had a question around STFC. So what impact do you expect the STFC budget reductions to have on the UK's ability to remain a frontier of the very best research and innovation?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I should say that the STFC budget is not reducing, so the budget is flat. As I'm clearly not explaining myself well, because I've said this a number of times, but within a flat budget, we're forecasting costs to exceed budget. So we have to reduce costs in order to come into line with a flat budget. I realise that has implications, right? It means that we have to make decisions about what we can and can't support within that portfolio. The question again was, what implications do I have it has on an international scale? Have I got that right, Claire?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be clear, I don't expect any withdrawal from any of our international projects into which we're already committed. So we play subscriptions for half a dozen, in fact more than half a dozen different international facilities, and I don't expect us to move away from any of those. We should absolutely be seeking to get the best value from those subscriptions and making sure that we're getting the best return for UK investment. And that is also something where I don't think we've given it enough effort and enough priority to make sure that we're squeezing all the value from those collaborations as possible. But I don't expect any change. And in terms of our prominence on a world stage, as I said before, our job is to manage a portfolio where we make the biggest impact. And so the things that are making less impact nationally and internationally, those are the things that we should reduce in order to protect the things that make the biggest impact, and therefore don't actually think our prominence on an international stage will be hugely affected by these choices. But they are choices that have to be made, right? We cannot see costs being forecast to exceed budget and not take action. It's the responsible thing to do, to take action, and we are trying to do that in the most consultative and engaging way that we can by talking to all of our community, our advisory panels, our council, our science boards, about what are the right choices to make across that portfolio. And that's a process that we're very much in the foothills of at the moment, and we'll go through to June in order to work out what are the best choices to make.
Thank you. The 2022-27 strategy included diversity as a principle for change and committed to supporting research across a diversity of institutions. Can you tell us how the new strategy will support the diversity of institutions in the higher education sector?
Do you want to have a go?
Yes. Well, again, this is a Research England focus, in that we strongly believe that we need a dynamic, diverse, agile, changing and developing research and innovation system as it's represented through the institutions that participate. And so we definitely are keen to support a wide range of institutional types with all sorts of different activities going on within it that constantly change and develop. And teams think about new things, and they emerge, and ideas emerge from all of those different places. They range from huge multi-faculty research intensive universities through to really quite small, tiny, very, very specialist institutions that are contributing something unique in themselves. And so really, what's the portfolio of all of that we need to support to get right, to have the best possible system? We're spending quite a lot of time thinking about that, particularly given that institutions are quite challenged at the moment financially and aren't able to support the same levels of research that perhaps they could do, in the last few years. So yeah, we want to continue to support this, and we all need to work together to say, what does the best model of that look like for the future?
Just beyond universities, I'm also very keen that we make the biggest use of our centres, institutes, catapults, units, all of the other bodies that exist, sort of either owned by or separate to universities. That consortium has now come together under an umbrella organisation called the National Research Organisations, which is led by Stu Wainwright. And I think that coordination is the way that we can help make the biggest impact from them. They all have different skills and assets to bring to a communal endeavour, and that they are stronger together. So finding the best way to use the assets which exist in the different places is a big part of our job, actually.
Yeah, and I just wonder whether there's something else to say, in that we've probably, although collaboration and research and between teams is the order of the day, especially for interdisciplinary activities, but we probably haven't thought sufficiently about how to create a system that is more collective than it is currently, more shared endeavour type activities, where all parts of the system are working as collectives rather than single institutions or institutes competing sort of with each other. So we're doing together, aren't we, quite a lot of thinking to say, well, how do we stimulate that more collective action in the national interest? We don't yet have the answers to all of that, but we're very interested in sort of fostering a conversation that might say, what does it look like to create a system that's more collective and more working in the national interest, given that our resources can only go so far, and we need to support that shared endeavour approach now.
Thank you, Jessica. That moves on to this question that I'm hoping you could answer as well. So UKRI's data shows persistent inequalities in funding access. For example, 28% of PI awards go to women versus a wider academic benchmark of 42%. How will UKRI move beyond reporting disparities to actively redesigning funding systems to address them?
I can start that, and I'm sure that others will have things to say. I mean, this is a very, very important agenda, and one that we're all passionate about, trying to get, the best ideas come from diverse teams, the best research outcomes come from diverse teams, and we need all the minds to be working on the challenges that we have going forward. So it's really, really important, and there have been disparities. UKRI has done a lot of work and will continue to do a lot of work to make sure that there aren't inherent biases in our assessment approaches. and that we bring forward proposals that enable that, and panels are well trained to do that work. But it isn't only about that. We have a systemic problem throughout the research and innovation system, top to bottom, where we have gender imbalances at every level, professorial level, for example. We have diversity issues from other characteristics as well, and low numbers of Black academics, for example, able to participate. So it's incumbent on all of us and all our institutions to be working on how do we make the system different? How do we make a more inclusive research and innovation system top to bottom? And how do we do systemic change to do that? There's been quite a lot of project work and innovative pilots of one thing and another, and they've been good to do. But I think perhaps we've said we haven't learnt enough about what best practice looks like and how we can really continue to change the dial on the data that we see. So it's deeply systemic. It's not just how the funding system works at the competitive end, and a collective project for all of us to work on.
To build on that, so two practical things that we're doing, and I say this coming from the social sciences, where in fact, our disciplines are very varied. We have some where the grant recipients are dominated by women and some where they're dominated by men, so quite a diversity of experience in those fields. The two practical things that we've been trying to do across UKRI, using the experimental capabilities that we've been building through meta science to look at how changing aspects of the application process and the grant process can actually improve aspects of diversity, whether that's through things like the narrative CV, whether that's through different ways of structuring the application, the specific application process, and trying to be a little bit more rigorous in our experimentation with those things so that we can learn and incorporate those things into how we work. The other thing that we found very useful from a social science point of view is that because these factors often speak to aspects within specific disciplines, we've been working with disciplinary organisations and providing funding to disciplinary organisations that want to take action on improving diversity and improving access, whether it's to research funding or to research careers. But those of you who are involved with membership organisations, learner societies will know money is always incredibly short, and particularly for diversity projects, when money is short, that can often rely on them expecting minoritized people to do free work to try and remedy things, which is clearly compounds the injustice. So providing that funding from our point of view has been one really effective way in trying to improve that change. So the combination of experimentation and working with the disciplines we found has helped us to make some progress. So I think we will continue with those two things.
I suppose I'll just build and say that I really do think that look, it's not good enough. The numbers that you quote are not good enough. But like Jessica said, this is a systemic whole of sector approach. It's not just that we should play our part. We have to do our bit right, and we have to make sure we don't bake in any perverse incentives into the system. But we all have to act in concert here to correct this. We can't do it from our end alone. I view this a little bit similarly to the full economic cost issue. That we all have to treat that in the right way, because you can recover costs, but the system somehow doesn't. And there's incumbents on us in the assessment process, but there's incumbents on the applicants to make sure they're costing properly, and not lowballing things, and a number of issues like this that drive prejudice, insustainability into the system. They are a whole of system. We all have to work together to fix it. We can't fix it in UKRI alone.
Researchers like to hedge their bets with research applications as they know success rates are low and many academic metrics are focused on research income. Therefore, reducing the volume of applications will require a real change. How do you anticipate UKRI supporting universities and university research offices in navigating this change?
That's yet another one of what I just said. It's a whole of system approach, right? There are perverse incentives put in place in the system because of how promotion is given, how tenure is given, how you develop an academic track record which drive this perverse behaviour of frankly wasted effort, because people are putting in so much effort into grants that go nowhere because that you're just driving down through volume, driving down success rates. We collectively have to work on solutions to that. As I said earlier in my introduction, I think the notion that, and I think I'm being quite conservative really, but the notion that we have 10,000 of the brightest minds of the country writing grant applications and assessing grant applications does not seem like a good use of 10,000 people to me. Imagine what difference you could make to the world with 10,000 brilliant people. So, collectively, this is not UKRI alone. Collectively, we have to fix this problem.
Yeah, and we tried to, as you know, with the Research Excellence Framework, we are gradually shifting some of the incentives there to move away from the idea of volume of publications or volume of grants are the metrics to be pursued. We're very interested in rewarding institutions for their work they do to create the best possible environment in which academics and researchers and research teams can thrive. As you know, that hasn't been straightforward because institutions and the academic community tend to hold on to the conservatism of thinking published outputs is the best way to assess performance, for example. So it's a shift for all of us to think about how do we create the right incentives and assessment systems and so forth to try and change the system for the future. I completely agree. We've over time built a system that is largely operating on an enormous amount of grant applications rather than research outcomes being engendered perhaps too much. So I look forward to a different world that we might invent.
Thanks, Jessica. An international question next. So what role do you think international collaboration can play to help UKRI achieve its goals and mission? Are there specific ways UKRI is including international collaboration within its strategic plan?
Yeah, it's a great question and it has to be a key part of it. I feel this around a number of the interventions that we've made in UKRI in the recent history, which is that we've tried to do everything, and we're not big enough to do everything. And I'd rather do some things really well. And I feel a little bit that way with international collaboration. We had a very good senior management discussion about this recently, where in the past we've taken an approach of trying to collaborate with so many countries that we end up underserving them all and not having tight, concerted strategic relationships that then yield the biggest benefit to us. So I would rather that we had a sort of a proper strategic approach to this, where we identify some countries where we can have the strongest relationship so that we get the biggest leverage and additionality from our investment, and therefore make a larger collective impact, and put real effort into those relationships rather than giving tiny effort to literally 100 different country relationships. So it's a bit of focus where we can make the biggest impact, I think, is the right approach to take here. Stian or Jessica, anything to add?
I mean, just to echo, there's as with any relationship, but particularly with international funding and collaboration relationships, there's a fixed cost. So prioritizing allows us to be smart about where we incur those fixed costs. I mean, we know this with Horizon, to give an example of one of our biggest partners, the ability to develop those relationships, the relationships with the Commission, the relationships with co-partners across Europe. Once you've invested in those that cost can be defrayed across a number of applications and a number of grants. Similarly, we've been putting effort in some areas to developing bilateral relationships with non-statutory international funders, such as philanthropic organizations, and there's an activation energy to those processes. But once you've overcome that, the benefits and the collaboration can in many cases be really high. But to do that without prioritization, you end up spreading your fixed costs across a very large number of different projects, and so the return and the benefits for researchers are lower.
Thanks, Stian. Could you explain more about how national infrastructure is funded across the buckets? There appear to be budget lines for equipment, infrastructure, centres and institutes in buckets 1, 2 and 4.
Yeah, okay, I can have a go at that. Maybe Jessica, you could talk about the RCIF and world-class labs, So you're right, we do have a number of different infrastructure investments, but if I try to categorize them, at the top level, we have the largest investments, which are across councils, and so we keep a fund in the centre, which we call our infrastructure fund, and we have a comparator digital research infrastructure fund as well. Neither of which, no council alone could take on projects of that scale. So we hold in the centre, and we do a tensioning across the councils for the projects which are large scale projects that are the best across the councils, and they get funded from either the infrastructure fund or the digital research infrastructure fund. Then below that, we have investments at council level, which are usually more modest infrastructure equipments that come through world-class lab competitions. Those are run by the councils. Every year we'll launch processes for all of them by September this year, alongside research capital infrastructure money, which Research England give out and the other devolved governments give to their organisations. Jessica, can I throw to you to talk about that part?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so every institution who receives QR also gets a sum of money each year to fund capital infrastructure. It's scaled on the basis of the scale of the institution's research and quality size, so from very large amounts down to really quite small amounts, depending on the institution. Now, in the past, that was completely up to the institutions to decide precisely how they use it, whether they're developing new equipment or facilities, or whether they're sustaining existing ones. From this year, we're changing direction a bit on that to encourage and ask institutions to use that funding to do sustaining of their existing research facilities in a state. We did a piece of work over the last year or so to investigate how the research estate in universities was faring, and found that there really is a huge backlog of repairs, maintenance, but also renewal of equipment to support facilities that exist. So we're going to, from now on, ask institutions to focus that funding on that, rather than on building up brand new facilities in buildings or whatever. So for that kind of activity, from this year on, universities will acquire that from competitive funding, if they're not going to source it from their own resources, through the world-class labs competitions. Each of the research councils have funds to run those kinds of competitions. And I think increasingly we'll be asking for that to be thinking about doing those things as more collaborative ventures. It might be regionally, or it might be around a disciplinary area or whatever, rather than them being for the sole use of institutions themselves, where that makes sense. It doesn't always make sense to do it that way, obviously, depending on the science or the activity. So it's a more strategic approach to developing our infrastructure across the whole system, really. And Ian, there's a similar model, isn't there, for the institutes, where they've got funds to do, and they're going to be asked again to prioritise sustaining their current facilities and equipment. I'm sure we'll get lots of questions about what's allowed and what's not, but basically, there's freedom to operate. Okay, if a microscope needs updating because it's got out of date, it isn't up to what science requires anymore, then you can buy a new one. That is still sustaining the facilities that exist, but we're not expecting brand new ventures to be developed through the allocations to institutions or institutes.
I should have given context really at the top level, so that the budget for infrastructure, which is actually a little bit in DSIT, which we then administer for them, but over the 4 years, the budget for infrastructure at large is £5.5 billion. You will see a bit more of a shift towards digital and physical. In the past, we were very heavily skewed towards physical, with not very much spend on digital, and the community have told us time and time again that we need to rebalance that and invest more in digital. So there is a skewing of that £5.5 billion in a bit more heavily towards digital research infrastructure, which generally applies across many disciplines, of course. But the infrastructure fund at total goes up considerably, actually, over this spending review period. Claire, can we squeeze one more in?
Sure. Are you able to provide any further information around plans for UKRI to share quarterly updates on upcoming call openings? When will this be implemented?
Yeah, I hope that we'll be starting that from June. So I did a very short video piece last couple of weeks ago on the pipeline that we know about so far. We are working at pace, trying to develop that pipeline going out for the rest of the year. And I'm hoping that in June we'll be able to do an event like this, a sort of webinar type event, where we can talk you through the calls that are coming over the next quarter, so that you're well sighted and you've got time to prepare. And then we'll do that every quarter. That's my aim, so that you've got good pipeline and you've got plenty of time to prepare. Thank you very much. I think we will have to draw to an end there. We've used up our hour. It's rattled by very fast. I really hope that you found that useful. We tried to get through as many questions as we could in that time. Of course, we were never going to get through them all. If there's appetite for these type of events, then we'll look to host a similar event in the future as we've got more to say, and take your input and try to address it in the strategy that we publish later in sort of late spring, early summer. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for the energy and effort that you put into all the great questions that we've had. I hope you found that useful. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.